Remember when all villains were bad, all heroes were brave, and all heroines were sweet and simple?
But you, in contrast to men, women are today more and more precociously mature, treated as small adults, already as small girls expected to control their lives, to plan their career, and so on and so on. What then is happening today with sexual difference in the traditional sense of gender? To fill in this void, a new one in the sense of individuality is emerging. A hedonist consumer caught in market competition, enjoying life, and simultaneously a ruthless manipulator in how she, he, they, it does it. Here, unexpectedly, sexual difference enters. Men are ludic adolescents, outlaws, out of law. Women, more and more hard, mature, serious, legal, punitive beings. Women are today not called upon by the ruling ideology to be subordinated. They are called, solicited, expected to be judges, administrators, ministers, CEOs, teachers, even police women and soldiers. A paradigmatic scene occurring daily in our security institutions, I don't know how it is with you here, but in Europe it is like this, is that of a feminine teacher, judge, psychologist taking care of an immature, asocial young male delinquent. The face of power was a woman who was at the same time a little bit maternal, caring, oh, I want to understand you, to help you, but no less brutal, efficient, the voice of power. A new figure of the one is thus arising, a cold, competitive agent of power, seductive and manipulative, attesting to the paradox that in the conditions of capitalism, women can sometimes do better than men. Now, to avoid a misunderstanding, I must be very careful here. I am not in any way making women suspicious as today's agents of capitalism and so on. I only think that in the conditions of late capitalism, if women want to become powerful, which I totally support, even if this power can be brutal and so on, I think that more and more in our society, from England after Brexit to Germany to the unfortunate Margaret Thatcher 30 years, 20 years ago, to India, Indira Gandhi, and so on. You know, we men are more and more bullshitters. If you want job to be done in a tough way, you need a woman, not a man. What all I'm saying is that this woman, this figure of feminine identity that the system offers to you to be successful is very suspicious. It's another trap of the existing order. There is a political triad which renders perfectly this predicament that I'm trying to describe. Three names enter: Hillary, Duterte, Trump. Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, are they not today's ultimate political couple? Trump is precisely what Badiou is describing, the eternal adolescent, a reckless hedonist, prone to irrational, brutal outbursts that hurt or appear to hurt his chances, while Hillary exemplifies the new feminine one, a self-controlled, ruthless manipulator who recklessly exploits her femininity and presents herself as caring for the marginal victims, and her femininity makes her all the more efficient in manipulation. So one should not be seduced by Hillary Clinton's image of the victim of Bill Clinton, who was gladly philandering around, allowing women to suck him, whatever you... And you know where we can see this decay of legal order, even in your society, for example. You remember, when was it, a couple of months ago, when a guy also called some policemen, shot some policemen, I don't know where. Then all the right-wingers with Trump, of course, on their head, exploded. Like, that's enough, that's too much. Will we now allow policemen to be freely shot? But this scandalized me, because, you know why? Because let's compare these two, okay, crimes. A desperate individual shoots policemen, and in excessive use of force, police shoots usually to death, usually a black guy. I claim not the first, the second crime is much more dangerous. Why? In the first case, when a lone guy, I think it was a black army veteran, shoots policemen, this is simply external to the law. Some outsider takes revenge. But when policemen do the killings, this means undermining rule of the law from within.
As a disclosure, most of us are still reverberating and shaking or shaken down with a sense of despair and horror, but some, and mostly with a sense also of mute shock. It took me a while to get off the mute button myself, but I'd like you to consider the experience or inexperience, to the extent that we, can you stop that noise? To the extent that something happened on the order of an event which we might not be able to appropriate, but what would that disclosure be? What was disclosed? What will have been disclosed? What would the pressure and weight of the disclosure be? It would be something like a nihilistic buildup. A lot of us have been reading up on nihilism, and a major attack on democracy. We didn't expect, some of us, the resentimental fervor with which Hillary would be slammed. And I would like to urge that we think about and discuss together at some point the trope discovered by Nietzsche, that of ressentiment, a resentment that motors history, according to Nietzsche. So a lot of you are feeling fragile. We have a lot of fragility, or what our friend Judith Butler calls precariousness, that probably is deepening and intensifying. We have a lot to talk about, a lot to think about, ever since at least Adorno marked these F factors, meaning fascistoid factors, that he saw all over, distributed all over America, already damals. So one wants to consider the disappearance of authority, already signaled by Kojève and Arendt, and what it means to have an authoritarian thing, or unding, an unthing, that is perched on the disappearance and loss of authority. This I can't say more about, but I'd love to if you insist. So so fast forwarding, even though our mourning process has barely begun, let me urge you not to introject the wounding insults that you've been served, consciously or unconsciously, according to a logic that's all too clear, or even subterranean, and still moving toward you. Let us size together the rhetorical damage, the weaponizing of language, the destruction of our great, great cousins, friends, families, and other topologies of intimacy, Muslims, women, people of color, and everyone who's being undermined and beaten down right now. So I'm wondering if this is not game-changing for my friend Slavoj in some ways, because this is, there's so much to consider, and what kind of pushbacks and paybacks are being distributed right now. Don't forget that Comey was kind of after Bill Clinton, who pardoned an Israeli spy. I don't know if you remember that episode. There's a lot of history going back and forth that we might want to consider together as we try to clear some abysses with the understanding that we're now groundless. We always were, but now some disclosure has, in a way, manifested itself. So I have so much to say to you, to ask you to kind of protect yourselves the way we protect the question here, and don't kid yourself. The university and learning is already a target of opportunity for the new regimens. We now compete with Trump University, among other institutional mutations. But there will also be social aggressions that come from outfield or left or right. And just let's try to protect each other, one another, and ourselves. With that in mind, and your anti-ballistic shields up and ready, I introduce my friend and colleague and pain in the ass on so many levels, Slavoj Žižek.
So that's the absolute limit of my support for Donald Trump. He's disgust embodied. My hope is this one. Can his crazy victory trigger a certain process of political renewal without risking too much new authoritarian rule? I made a risky decision. I can well be convinced that I am wrong. But to conclude, my message to you would be to really conclude this one. Trump's victory may create a new political situation with chances for organized, more radical left. So, if you love America, as I do, now it's the time for the hard work of love, for becoming engaged in the long process of the formation of a radical political left in the United States. Or, to quote Mao Zedong again, this would be my formula of your situation now. There is a great disorder under heaven, so the situation is excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Slavoj.
You are like my British friends. They can praise you, but in such a way that you can see the mortifying dimension. You are kind to people in a way, cutting me with a knife. Okay, this is just
Listen,
modest.
do you think you're projecting?
I
I said thank you.
You see, didn't she say now thank you in a very ungrateful way? Sorry.
In a very Nietzschean way. Okay, so fuck you very much. And we do have time if you want to ask a question or so. I will just toss out one thing, which is I would put on our reading list if we had 6 more weeks to discuss, maybe Lyotard, who would throw into question this emancipatory jubilation that just the sense.
Yeah, that's generally, yeah.
Yeah, the sense that that some renewal, this whole tropology of renewal, of emancipating, of organizing, and so even though you presented it very, very carefully, and I appreciate so much of what, as you say, about your enemies, I appreciate them otherwise. If there isn't still the kind of boost and pump of an emancipatory fiction, and maybe we have gone too far. This time we went too far. And what would that mean philosophically and in terms of a certain kind of lexicon of reflection that I urge upon all of us, which is what it means to have gone too far.
Who, we or Trump? Or we or,
All of us. It's just too far. We went too far. There's no retraction possible. Hypothetically, there's no beating
okay, but
a
what
path
we
or
should do
finding
then?
a path.
Go back? Or how
No,
do we get
I'm-
out of this shit?
That would be my question, rather than to. We needed you very much, and we needed a sense of that narrow path that wasn't happening last night, to some sense of futurity. And something happened, an event happened in your talk to us. I think we're very grateful. We needed this very much. If I can't say we in a stable way, I'm just rhetorically trying to shut myself down very quickly. But at the same time, is it, since you would understand this so well, just a sugar high or a false high to revert, though we may have needed it, or it might be what Nietzsche would call an enabling fiction, to think that there could be an emancipatory other side or negotiation with something that just went too far. This is just a question, and I'm opening the discussion to you. If you have questions, you don't have to answer. This would
Can
be...
I just reply in a very friendly way, very briefly to you?
Sure.
I
Friendly
see
is
your
good.
problem. I just would have insisted. I was thinking a lot about it. But my first problem here is this one. When I speak about emancipation, please forget about the 20th century. I'm not dreaming about a new proletarian revolution or communist party or whatever, although I remain very radical. What do I mean by this? Listen, we live in a very paradoxical situation where, on the one hand, there is an incredible popular rage exploding all around even the developed world, here in Europe and so on. But there is again and again an impossibility to translate this rage into even a minimally organized political program and so on, and so on. And that's for me a mega tragedy. I'm sorry if some of you know this metaphor of mine, but I like it so much that I repeat it all the time. Did you see the movie V for Vendetta? You know how it ends up. People win in United Kingdom, and they penetrate the parliament, people are in power. Okay, I am sorry for repeating this old tasteless remark of mine. I'm ready to sell my mother into slavery, and it's safe to say because she is already dead, but that's another point. I'm ready to see a movie which would be called V for Vendetta Part 2. I was so interested, but what happens then the next day? What do the revolutionaries do? How do they reorganize the government or whatever? And